Cumberland traffic, airplane 4041 uniform, departing 11 for Idaho.
I could see it. I was probably at 14,000 feet, and there were, I could see the flames below and smoke starting to rise. And I could also see there were 3 paragliders that were basically right over the flames. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are getting smoked there.
The second line is related to our ego, making the will to achieve the original flight goal such a huge factor that it blinds the pilot from a rational analysis of the situation.
This is Soaring the Sky, a glider pilot's podcast, coming to you from the Mid-Atlantic region here in the United States and bringing you great soaring content from glider pilots all over the globe. We now join Chuck and our guest pilot.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for joining us for this episode. Also, a big thank you to our Patreon pilots that help us keep things moving here so we can continue to bring you more great soaring content like this episode you are about to hear. And recently, I had the privilege to catch up with Clemens Ceipek about his recent experience competing at the 18-meter nationals in Nephi, Utah. He talked about the crazy transitions in terrain there, strong thermals, dealing with TFRs because there's actually a wildfire going on. Nephi is a majestic place to fly. I had a lot of fun talking to him about his experiences while learning a lot as well. Also on this episode, our friend Sergio The Soaring Master is back with another lesson to be learned. This one is focused on the mental battle we go through before landing out. But before we get to all that, I have some exciting news, especially for you Condor pilots out there. We are glad to have our sponsor, Just Soaring, back with a couple of updates about their Glider Sim Pro, a sailplane simulator cockpit for Condor soaring. Their website is all new and now has a couple of videos to look at, updated product pictures and specs, and even a facts section to help answer some of your questions. If you follow the Soaring Academy on Instagram, you've probably seen one of the first production units in operation there at Crystal Airport, and so far it's a big hit with their students and instructors. Just Soaring is also proud to be the lead sponsor of the first ever FAI-sanctioned esports glider race. That's right, the Sailplane World Grand Prix is coming in September. The winning pilot gets a Glider Sim Pro. You'll be seeing lots more of their Glider Sim rigs across the U.S. and the rest of the world in the coming months, so check them out at justsoaring.com on the web or just.soaring on Instagram. Well, let's get to our guest pilot. Clemens, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, hi Jock, how are you?
I'm doing great. You know, we have been privileged to have you on a few times, but listeners, if they want to hear more of your soaring journey that started back a few years, they can go back to episode 14, and that one's titled Austria and the Alps. You know, the team here and I at Soaring the Sky, we've been keeping up with your adventures at the 18-meter nationals there, Nephi. So we did want to reach out to you again and get all those details. And originally, I wanted to start the interview with some top-level takeaways from that week there in Nephi for you, but then decided maybe we should just dive right into some of those more specific questions that we came up with in no particular order, and then maybe towards the ends of the segment, we could give you a chance to fill in any blanks and just summarize your journey at the event, and of course, thank some of those organizers, if you like, and competitors.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
The race was held in Utah, which of course shares many soaring terrain and weather characteristics with lots of other western states like California, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and so on. So how much of a factor or advantage is it for pilots with real mountain or desert soaring background compared to maybe those East Coast pilots like myself that just don't have as much soaring time out west?
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe I should preface this with the fact that almost my entire soaring is in the mountains. And so I really can't speak very well for flatland pilots. But I would say that most of the soaring in Nephi specifically is thermal soaring. And so anyone who's a flatland pilot obviously is a thermal pilot because that's basically all they have. And most of the soaring in Nephi is thermal. So, I mean, there are some things that are different and specific, but I wouldn't say, just because somebody comes from the flatland, they shouldn't be concerned about going to Nephi. Nephi is actually fairly a fairly accessible site. But there's a few things that are different. So, for example, the thermals are stronger and they go higher, way higher, right? So and because they're stronger, you have to be more selective in what you take and what you don't take. So you can really lose a race very quickly if you make too many turns in weak stuff. So 2 or 3 knot lift is not going to cut it when there is 7 to 10 knots available, or 12 knots, or 14 knots, or even more available elsewhere. I would say convergence plays a bigger role, and that is something that is probably not common and not very flatland people are not super familiar with. And convergence lines are frequent and they're pretty strong. And if they're really strong, you can go straight for a long, long time without making any turns. And if you look at the clouds and where the convergence is and where the lift is relative to the clouds, if the clouds are convergence indicated, the way to look for the lift is a little different than it would be in the flatland. So reading convergence lines is really helpful and important. But the only way to gain experience in doing it is to go and try and figure it out. And I would say, do it. There's an intimidation factor, I think, maybe for some people in Nephi or in mountainsides in general. But I think that intimidation factor in Nephi is a little bit more modest than it would be, for example, in Colorado. So where we fly in Boulder, it's even more technical and forbidding the terrain than it is in Nephi. Nephi has big valleys and wide valleys, and there's lots of fields and there's lots of airports, and especially if somebody comes out for a regional competition as opposed to the nationals, they will keep everybody pretty close to landable areas. So I would say don't be afraid of that. And then terrain transitions. That's probably something that is pretty new for people who come from flatlands. I mean, if you fly in the flatlands, everything looks the same. Now you've got mountain ranges, and the mountain ranges, they're separating the weather systems and the air masses, and you will find different air masses behind each mountain range. And so you have to kind of switch gears as you go from one air mass to another air mass. And you've got these terrain transitions where you have to go over mountains or mountain ranges, and sometimes you have to assess whether you can make it across the mountains or not, and that takes a little bit of experience. I'd actually suggest that if anyone is flying in Condor, that is a great tool to figure out those terrain transitions, because they can be intimidating. So, I mean, those are some of the things that are different, but I wouldn't say, it's not an intimidating site overall.
A good place to learn how to fly in the West, it sounds like. I mean, you have a lot of options.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're first time in the mountains, Nephi is actually a great place to practice. Much easier than Boulder, for example.
So, how do you guys deal with overdevelopment during a task, and what are the risk rewards for maybe pushing into overdevelopment or close to overdevelopment conditions? And whenever I see YouTube or social media posts of a pilot looking at a big overdevelopment in front of them on their task, it always freaks me out a little bit. And I wonder, what does it feel like?
Well, I mean, there's overdevelopment and overdevelopment. Overdevelopment per se isn't bad, right? Overdevelopment basically just means there's a lot of clouds. And if you're in the flatlands and there is a lot of clouds, the clouds will shield the sun and have a big risk that the thermals will just shut down. I think what you're talking about is probably more the kind of overdevelopment that generates storms. And that can be intimidating. So I think it's important to understand what is causing the overdevelopment. And then it's also important to understand, is there a risk of thunderstorms? And that has less to do with how much of the sky is covered, but more in terms of how much vertical development is there. So if you see the clouds billowing up really, really high and tall into the sky, that's when you have to be really concerned, because that's a sure sign that you get thunderstorms that are brewing. But overdevelopment in and of itself is not necessarily bad. So let's say, for example, you can get convergence-induced overdevelopment along the Wasatch Plateau. So that's in Nephi. You got mountain ranges, and one of those mountain ranges that are north-south range is the Wasatch Plateau, and there is that plateau develops very quickly. But if there is a inversion layer on top of the plateau, so the clouds won't go super high, they won't go high vertical. They can spread out pretty quick, but you can still get under that overdevelopment. You can get a lot of lift along the edge of the plateau, even if the sky is completely overdeveloped. So I think it's more important to distinguish: is this something where you have to be concerned about safety? So thunderstorms obviously is when you have to be concerned about safety, or is it just overdevelopment that is going to block could block the thermal activity? But you can find great lift under very heavily developed skies, and it works really well. And on the other hand, you can have, like, we had a contest day out there during the nationals. I think on the first day, I was really late to get going because it took me too long to climb out. So I started behind everybody else, and there was a big thunderstorm was developing to the south side, so in the first turn area. I saw the whole gaggle in front of me. They went between two rain shafts. So there was raining on the left and on the right, and they just went straight in. And they were probably just early enough to still do it. But when I got there, it looked too risky to me. So I just basically nicked that one turn area. And I knew that it was costing me because there was certainly strong lift, even though it was completely overdeveloped and dark. But I was certain there was going to be strong lift, but I was just too afraid of storms, and that's why I only sort of nicked that turn area and went towards the next one, even though the conditions there were worse. But in this case, it was timing that really made the difference. So I think it's also important to really try and start to understand the sky, read the sky, and figure out what is going to happen in the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because this whole thing of seeing what will happen and what is likely going to happen, that is going to help you make the right decisions. And so,
a safe decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, safety obviously has to be the number one consideration, and always. That doesn't matter whether you're racing or not.
Right. Speaking of weather, what weather products do you lean into most? And if you use several different ones, which ones do you think are more accurate for which types of lift or conditions? I mean, some people say SkySight is better in predicting convergent conditions, while maybe XC Skies is better for looking at the thermal tops and boundary shear, and any number of those other comparisons of what these and other weather products do best or not quite as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say one is necessarily better than the other. First, I think it's important to understand the big picture of what's going on. So I think what's useful to first, before you even dive into any particular weather model, it's good to know, what is going on. Are there cold fronts? Are there where the pressure systems? What's how much water vapor is in the air? So I think those are important things, and then you can look at so you understand the big picture of what is the overall weather situation, and then you can look into the forecasts. And I think the SkySight forecast is certainly in my mind it's the easiest to use forecast. So it's very easy to use. It's highly visual. I think Matt Scott did a great job with it. Also having an open API, so it integrates with a lot of flight computer systems. So I downloaded on my flight computer, and I have the weather in the cockpit, at least the forecast weather in the cockpit. But for example, for convergence, it's super important, super useful, especially if the day is blue. I think SkySight is a very useful tool. XC Skies is a great product, but the thing with XC Skies is actually XC Skies is like 6 products, because you got 6 different weather models in XC Skies, and so you can go and use XC Skies. You can pick which weather model you want to look at, and the problem is the more weather models you're going to look at, the more confused you're likely going to get. At least that's what happened to me. I also used to have top Meteo as well, and I kind of it's easy to get frustrated by if you have 8 different weather models that you have available to you, and and you look at all of them, and each of them tells you something differently, then at the end you're more confused than you were without, then it's sometimes better to just look at the sky instead of looking at weather forecasts. But so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the best weather model is the one that you're most familiar with and that you're used to and that you have a longer term comparison to. So, is it more optimistic or is it more pessimistic? SkySat tends to be a little on the optimistic side, or maybe they just assume that everyone is a world-class soaring pilot and that just can't live up to to Matthew Scudder's standards. But if you compare what the SkySat thinks you can do and what you can do, the comparison is a helpful comparison.
Right.
If you have one weather model and weather forecasting system that you're really familiar with, that is probably your best one.
So we saw here the team, and I saw the blue hole that you had on your blog post. So can you talk about that for a minute?
Well, a blue hole. I mean, basically, what I refer to as a blue hole, and I don't know if there's another definition for that, but I just use the term blue hole to describe an area where there are no cumulus clouds. So, where basically the sky is blue. So, let's say you're flying along a beautiful line of cues, and you get great lift from one cloud to the next cloud to the next cloud, and suddenly your task takes you into an area where there's 30 miles, 40 miles of blue sky in front of you. And so that's what I refer to as a blue hole. There's an area without cues. And then the question is, what does that mean, right? We all know that cumulus clouds indicate lift or likely lift. And if you then have an area without clouds, does that mean that there is no lift? And I would say, well, not necessarily. It depends on what causes the area to be blue, but it's definitely a good idea to be cautious when you get to an area that is blue. You probably have heard of the term downshifting. So you basically, when you see the sky is blue ahead, then it's a good idea to tank up under one of the last clouds that you can find, get up to as high as you can get. And then fly into the blue a little cautiously. So don't speed up, but slow down and fly closer to your base glide ratio, and see what happens. And you might find that there is still good lift, and it's just maybe it's a little bit lower because there's an inversion that is preventing the clouds from developing, or maybe there is you might have a convergence line and just the air is drier in front of you and the convergence goes right through the blue hole area, but there are no cloud indicators because it's a drier air mass. So there's all kinds of reasons. You might also have a blue hole where the air is just sinking. So we have this a lot in Colorado, out into the plains where you get thermals developing over the mountains, and those thermals are sucking in air from the plains, and then the air from the mountains gets pushed out over the plains, and there it sinks down again. So on a typical summer day here in Colorado, you have got sinking air mass out of the plains between here and maybe 25, 30 miles away from the mountains. And that area really is not very good. So you don't want to, if you fly in there and you have a turn point in there, you better have enough altitude to make it there and make it back to the lift, because otherwise you will be landing.
Yeah. Sounds like it might get a little scary.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, I've had these turn points where I've had turn points that were 20 miles away from the last area of lift, and you had to get to the turn point and come back. And you just, in that case, the advantage of flying out in the West is sometimes you can climb so high that you can glide 20 miles into the blue and fly the 20 miles back to where the lift is. And you don't need any lift for 40 miles if you're high enough.
Right. Yeah.
But a blue hole itself isn't scary. It's just a reason to be cautious that there might not be as much lift as you would hope.
Yeah. I do want to thank our longtime sponsor of the show. We are so honored to have the support of the Southern California Soaring Academy. They are doing meaningful and almost monthly now nonprofit outreach work with local area veterans and also young people in STEM programs at their top-notch glider port facility located just outside of Los Angeles there in the high desert of Southern California. They also have a fantastic flight school there, and they are continuing to turn out great glider pilots every month. If you'd like to donate to their nonprofit initiatives or learn more about their flight school, please pop over to the website at soaringacademy.org or check them out on Instagram at Soaring Academy. This time of year, especially here in the United States, we see a lot of wildfires, especially out west. But have you ever had a TFR for a wildfire announced mid-race? And how do organizers and pilots handle a situation like that? If not during a race, how about while you're on a long personal task back in Colorado?
There's wildfire starting. Unfortunately, if you look at Skywake, the Skywake is a great tool to see where all the TFRs are. And if you look out right now, look out at the west. It's all over. There's wildfires and wildfire TFRs all over the place. So we actually had that happen in Nephi. So there was a contest day when a fire started midway during the contest day, and in fact, the first leg of our task was right through the area of where the fire started. And unfortunately, we, by the time it actually started right as we were going through that area, and I could see it. I was probably at 14,000 feet, and there were, I could see the flames below and smoke starting to rise, and I could also see there were 3 paragliders that were basically right over the flames. I'm like, oh my God,
wow.
These guys are getting smoked there.
Yeah.
And in the morning we checked and there was no TFR, right? So there was actually really no alternative but to keep going. I knew that when these fire TFRs happen, they always get a ceiling, so a maximum altitude, because the firefighters, they all fly pretty close to the fire, right? They're not gonna dump. They're not going to dumping water from 18,000 feet. So right. Typically, typically those ceilings tend to be at 11,000, 12,000, maybe 13,000 feet. And so I was at 14,000 feet. So I thought even if a TFR was being declared, I'm going to be high enough flying over it. Except, of course, if it's a contest, the issue in a contest is you're not allowed to fly over any fire TFR. In U.S. contests. So if there is a TFR, you're not allowed to fly over it at any altitude. Even if the TFR is only to 14,000, the rules say you can't fly over it. But also the rules don't say what to do if the TFR is declared mid-flight, because obviously you couldn't know it before you take off, right? And so there's really no way. I don't think this is addressed in the rules, because we talked about this on the next day. What happened in this case is that the fire started, but the TFR wasn't declared until a few hours after that. So we didn't have an airspace issue. Everybody who flew through the area, regardless of altitude, they were all fine because there was no TFR by the time they flew through the area. But then we talked about what happens if that happens again, right? And the TFR is declared. And actually the organizers, they talked to the people who are doing the firefighting. I don't know exactly who they talked to, but and they gave them the contest frequency. So they basically struck a deal that if a TFR is declared mid-flight, the firefighters, they could make an announcement directly on the contest frequency, and as soon as that announcement was made, we would not be allowed to fly through that area.
Oh, nice.
Fortunately, that never happened, right? So it didn't happen during the contest. That we didn't have another fire, and the one that started, they got it out after 3 days. It was pretty small fire. But yeah, that happens. And in my own flying, when I fly in Colorado, if I see a fire and there's no fire TFR, I just stay far away from the area of the fire. I just won't fly through it. It's also the last thing you want to do when firefighters are starting to fight a fire is you don't want to be a pain for them. You want to help them and get out of their way.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great idea that you guys gave them the frequencies so they could let you know.
Yeah, basically that was the best we could do under the circumstances. Right. Yeah.
I'm not a competition pilot myself, but often I wondered how important is physical conditioning for these marathon races. I mean, you guys are waking up pretty early. You're waiting, and then a lot of times you're going to be sitting there in the heat for a little bit, and you're flying for hours. And then, of course, you have events and maybe some adult beverages at night. I mean, how do you do all that?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely an endurance event, and I flew. In my case was even worse because I flew the 20-meter multi-seat nationals in Montague, and then I had 3 days where I had to fly back to Colorado, get my glider, trailer my glider back out to Nephi, and then fly another 10-day event. So I had one 10-day
wow.
event in Montague, and then followed by another 10-day event in Nephi. So it was definitely an endurance event. I mean, soaring is not a very physical sport, but obviously it takes a lot of concentration. And our brain actually, this is the one organ in our body that consumes the most energy is our brain, and so there's a lot of there's a lot of energy that's required, and it's definitely an endurance event. So it's I mean you're trying to fly as well as possible, but you also have to constantly have to pay attention to all the other gliders, and that adds to the workload, right? In a normal, if I go soaring on a weekend and there's maybe 3, 4, 5 other gliders around, and each flies their own task. I mean, the workload of watching for other people is fairly modest because you look at the farm, you know where they are, and they tell you on the radio where they are, and nobody's around for 40 miles, so you don't have to look out like crazy. But if there's 30 other gliders that you're flying with in the same thermal, that takes a lot of workload, and so I think that all adds to this, to the workload. But so. Physical conditioning, I mean, I don't know. I think some people say it's hugely important. I personally don't know. I'm glad that I have a reasonable endurance fitness level. I used to be, I used to do a lot of ultra cycling. I used to do ultra marathons. I still do long trail runs and long hikes in the mountains. And but I was still very happy to get our 2 rest days that we got during the event, because
sure.
I was totally exhausted. I mean, if 3 days of flying under these conditions, I was after 3 consecutive days, I was totally exhausted. I'm like, can we please have a day when it rains?
Yeah, right. Please rain, please.
but you only want 1 day of rain, and then you want it good. Right. And in terms of drinks, I mean, I really think alcohol is not good for decision making. So yeah. I only do like maybe one beer at night. That doesn't do much harm, but no. I definitely wouldn't get drunk, so that would not be a good idea.
Right. Yeah, that wouldn't work out so good. Yeah. I think a lot of lower hour pilots without much cross country experience, they all ran into situations where they might be booming 10 plus knot lift, right? But then this massive sinkholes are there, or large areas of opposite sink. That just makes them really nervous about stretching beyond their comfort zone. What thoughts do you have to share with pilots like that to make less nervous maybe, or just prepared to handle those situations or conditions?
I mean, you have... I mean, are you talking about people who are interested in who have no cross country experience, or are you talking about contest flying? You're talking about just 10 knot lift and big sink, because I mean, if you're let's talk about contest flying. So I don't want to maybe flying a nationals contest is not the first good thing for anyone with no cross country experience, but I don't think that happens anyway, right? So,
right.
But I would encourage anyone to fly contests. I think that's especially regional contests. In some ways, that is actually easier and more accessible than flying cross country at your home airport. I mean, there's somebody setting a task for you, and there's a weather person who really knows the stuff, and they give you a really good weather briefing. You don't have to figure it out all on your own. There's a retrieve office, so if you have to land out, there's a system in place for people to come and get you. So there's a lot of support that is available that is not normally available. So I would encourage anyone, even if they have relatively little cross country experience, but I mean, obviously you should have some.
Yeah.
You should have some cross country experience to fly contests. And the 10 knot lift and the sink kind of thing, I mean, that is a classic. If you have 10 knot lift, there will be sink.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you have mountains, there will be sink too,
Yep.
right? So and especially if there's wind. Wind is actually more, wind and mountains are more problematic than just lift and mountains.
Yeah.
On a pure thermal day and you have 10 knot lift, you're not going to find 10 knot sink that easily. Unless it's, you're close to thunderstorms, then of course all bets are off.
Yeah.
But if you have mountains and you have strong wind, well, you can get 20 knots of lift and you can get 20 knots of sink, and they can be very, very close together. And that is really scary. So I would say to anyone with little cross-country experience, do not fly in mountains with a lot of wind. That's a real recipe for disaster. But otherwise, I would say, if you're just looking to gain cross-country experience, flying a contest is a regional contest is a good idea. But also, if you just want to get I think getting out of your comfort zone at the beginning, I think that is important. And you can do this at your home airport. And I think the best way to do that is to do simple task flying. You set yourself some tasks, start with tasks that stay within glide range of your airport. You set some, there's actually a program, it's called Proving Grounds. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Chuck, but
yeah, we actually talked to him a little bit on the podcast. Yeah,
to Patrick. That's awesome. Yeah, so I would suggest, if your club has a Proving Grounds program, and I've set one up with some, with help from other people at our club. We've set one up for the Soaring Society of Boulder, and it's really helpful to the people who are trying to gain cross-country experience, because we set specifically tasks that are accessible and that keep people out of danger zones, and that the first tasks are set such that they can be flown within glide range of the airport. So if your club has that, do that program. If your club doesn't have that program, look it up anyway and see what tasks typically get set on a Proving Grounds program. Set up your own tasks like that, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you know how far you can glide to the airport. Set some tasks and fly those tasks, because once you fly tasks, you're gaining the confidence that you can make it from one turn point to the next turn point to the next turn point, and you can make a short task and fly it 5 times in a row, and you gain a lot of confidence that you can fly where the task tells you to fly, as opposed to where the sky looks good.
Yeah, exactly.
And so once you can do that, then it's easy to go, and then you gradually increase it, right? And as you do that, you learn a lot about observing the clouds, reading the weather, understanding the glide performance of your glider, and having confidence in looking ahead and knowing, can I glide that far or can I not glide that far? You don't even have to have, a flight computer telling you that. It's actually better if you can judge it based on your own visual references and based on your own experience, than relying on technology. Technology can, especially in this case, can mislead you big time. So don't just trust your flight computer. Trust your own experience, and push yourself. Each flight you can do something that is a little bit harder than you've done before. You never have to take any safety risks. Learn to distinguish between safety risks and sporting risks. Sporting risk is just the risk of landing out in a safe place, and that's totally acceptable. You have to get familiar with that, but don't ever take safety risks.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great advice there. Clemens, how much does FLARM data and the potential presence of other gliders in your planned flight path affect or not affect what you're doing during the task? Are there times where you just want to steer clear of traffic for no other reason than you think there might be collision possibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not I don't have that much contest experience so I'm not sure my answer is completely representative of everybody else. And also my technology isn't that great in my glider. I have a farm view screen that's pretty small, and it tells me, it's a great tool for collision avoidance. So if there is somebody on collision course, I know where they are, and I know how to stay clear of them.
Right.
But it doesn't give me a lot of the good technology that helps you in the contest is the technology where you have a complete map with everybody where they are at, and where they're heading, and what their climb rate is, what their current climb rate is, and so. But I don't have that. Have that in my glider. So I found that was actually a big shortcoming to use it tactically. So as an advantage. So some people can tactically use this. I didn't use it tactically. I actually did what you're describing. I did, especially in the pre-start area. I oftentimes went away from everybody. Unfortunately, there was a lot of lift in Nephi on most days, so you could find basically your own cloud, and park yourself under your. We had times where we had to wait for. I was in the air and we had to wait 2 hours before the whole fleet was launched and the task opened.
Wow.
So you basically we had days where I was flying around for 2 hours. Sometimes I flew more than 200 kilometers before the task started.
Oh my goodness! You're just hanging out.
You're just hanging out, yeah. But I was trying to go my own ways and stay away from everybody else to conserve energy. But I think the people who are really proficient at it and who have the right technology, they're using this very effectively as a basically a competitive intelligence tool, and they keep tabs on the best pilots and where they are at and how fast they're climbing, and they're trying to follow them. I actually tried to fly my own races, and for the most part stayed away from the big goggles. But that's why I didn't win the race. So that's not the reason, but it's one of the contributing factors.
We noticed that the final results sheet was populated by a lot of ASG 29s and JS3s, even with the handicap system that is used. Is there an inherent advantage to certain types of ships in these competitions over others, or does it just happen that the best pilots find their way into the 29 and the JS3?
It's a bit of both, but first, just to clarify, this is one of the few contests where there was no handicap system. So you have at the 18-meter nationals, you basically have your requirement is you have an 18-meter glider, and it can't be heavier than 600 kilograms, or 1,323 pounds. But there's no handicap being used, so all whatever you turn up with. So is there an advantage to the gliders? I think there is an advantage to gliders, but it's less the glider itself. It's mostly the wing loading that matters the most. Wing loading is essentially basically the weight divided by the wing area. And so if you have higher wing loading, so basically higher pounds per square foot, that will make the glider go faster for the same altitude loss. And so the gliders like the JS3 and the AS33, which is actually the successor to the 29, there was only one there, and I think it had some issues. The JS3s, they have the highest wing loading. If it's 60 kilograms, I don't know what per square meter. I'm not sure what that translates in pounds per square foot. But the JS3s have the highest wing loading, and that does give them an advantage in the glide performance on the runs. And the stronger the conditions are, the stronger that advantage becomes. If the conditions, because it really only helps if you're going really fast. If you're going at moderate speeds, it makes barely any difference. But once you go, really fast, 100 knots, 110 knots, 120 knots,
right.
It makes a big difference. And we had outstanding weather at this contest. I mean, the thermal strength was off the charts, and the cloud streets were great. So you didn't have to turn much. I mean, there was race. I flew on some of the days. I had less than around 10% thermaling percentage for the whole flight.
Wow.
So yeah, you basically 90% of the time you're going straight. And whenever you're going straight, but that's where you get an advantage if you have a glider that has a high wing loading. And so everyone was fully ballasted, right? So everybody had water ballast on board and up to the legal maximum. So we all had gliders weighing 1,323 pounds
Right.
every single day.
All right.
And so on those conditions, the best gliders will have an advantage. But it's also true that the best pilots will. It's very likely that the best pilots have the best gliders. So I'm actually trying to do some deep dive analysis into my races in Nephi, and I'm going to try and see if I can figure out how much is the glider and how much is the pilot. But I know it's both.
Right.
Yeah, I know it's both.
What's the most scenic or epic visual memory you have from Nephi during this contest? I mean, there is so much majestic, crazy, beautiful terrain out there.
It's a super scenic area to fly, and I mean, I'm spoiled, of course, because I normally fly in Colorado, and that's not exactly shabby either. But
True.
what I would say about Nephi that makes it special is that it's both a mountain and a desert site.
Oh yeah.
And so you have this stark contrast between lush green mountains on one side, and then just a few miles away you got Mars-like landscape.
Yeah.
And it's that contrast that's really makes it unforgettable. So you're flying over the mountain range, and it's all you got mountain meadows and lakes, and people camping there and having riding their ATVs and hiking, and like 10 minutes later you're out over the desert, and it basically looks like Mars. And there is you look outside and you look for signs of roads or any sign of civilization, towns. You can't find anything. All you see is desert. And so it's quite remarkable. Yeah. And then as you go further south, I mean, you can fly over areas that a lot of people are familiar with from some of their most memorable vacations, right? I mean, you've been to Zion Canyon maybe, or Bryce Canyon, or Escalante Staircase. I mean, those are all areas that are accessible from Nephi in a glider. And there's a place that's called Wayne Wonderland. That's what it is. It's a wonderland.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool site.
I want to take a minute and thank and tell you about our newest sponsor, Wings and Wheels. They've been serving the soaring and sport aviation community for more than 30 years now. They have the largest and most comprehensive inventory of sailplanes and soaring supplies in the U.S. Nearly everything you find on their site is in stock and ready for same-day shipping. They're proud to be an exclusive American representative for HPH Ltd., manufacturer of the finest quality sailplanes. The HPH Twin Shark is the newest 20-meter two-place sailplane on the market. Their staff has thousands of hours of flying experience in gliders and airplanes, staffed by Adam, Kelly, Julie, and Sean. You can bet a friendly voice will answer when you call. They're located in Eagle, Idaho, in their new commercial building with warehouse built to their specifications, and that was completed this year. Whether shipping domestic or international, your soaring-related supply list is covered. They would love for you to come and visit the next time you're in the Boise area. You can check them out on wingsandwheels.com. We're super excited to have them on the pod. Were there guys that were favorites going into the competition that for whatever reason just couldn't break the top 10? And what kinds of key factors typically happen that cause front runners or favorites maybe not hit the podium or even the top 10? Is it almost always just strategic errors out of the course, or maybe do you think it's often a racer just having a crappy week or physically or emotionally just not quite at 100%?
I think that it's important first maybe to understand that the soaring rules are such that you really can't win a contest by having a great day, but you can definitely lose an entire contest by having one really terrible day. So you just cannot have one bad day, because if you have one bad day, you basically your whole contest is toast. And so yes, we did have some people who I would definitely have considered contenders for the podium, who had one terrible day, and that was the end of the whole contest for them.
Wow.
So I mean,
Yeah.
for example, we had on the first count, and it can be a ridiculously small thing. So for example, we had on the first contest day Noel Wade. He's a super nice guy, and he suddenly had a flat tire as he was pushing out his glider to the grid.
Oh man.
And if you
Wow.
if you know how long it takes to take replace a tube and the tire on the glider, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a multi-hour task. And if
Yeah.
you're already starting, if the fleet isn't launching until 2 p.m., by the time you get back to your parking position, it's 2:30. Then you're starting to disassemble the whole thing. By the time you have it all fixed,
Yeah.
it's maybe 4:30, and it's
Oh
too
man.
late to take off and go after everybody because your day is
Yeah.
over. So, and that happened to him, and so it's really a shame because that basically blew his whole contest. I
Wow.
think
Yeah.
you
That sucks.
could go back and calculate his performance. If he had a good first day, he might have been on the podium.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's other things that can happen. I mean, there's if you have an airspace violation, that would kill your contest. So there was the contest we flew close to TFRs, right? We had one turn point in a restricted area. So if you fly into the restricted area, even if it's just for a few, for 20 yards,
Right.
you get 0 points for the day and the penalty on top. So it would be better if you hadn't
Ouch.
started at all. And
Yeah.
so if that happens one day to
Oh,
you,
man.
your whole contest is toast for sure.
Oh man.
Yeah. So the aim of the game is consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could just zero in on maybe one or two factors, what is the magic sauce that maybe the top 2 or 3 guys had, do you think, maybe that separated them and got them up on the podium?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I just said it. I mean, I think it is you have, if you want to win a contest at this level, you have to fly really well every single day. You don't even have to win any one day. You don't, not even one. I mean, the winners did win days, right? I think Sean won probably 2 days. I think Sean
Yeah.
Seaborn, I think, won 2 or 3 days. But you don't have to win any day. You can be, if you're third every day, you're almost certain to win the whole contest. I mean, I can't prove this right now, but I could do the math and I can prove it. But I'm absolutely convinced. If you're in the top 3 or even in the top 5 every single day, you win the whole contest. So the most important thing is you just have to fly fast on every day and good. You don't have to be the best. And to fly, to be really fast, basically the two major ingredients are: number one, you got to find you have to fly and lift and stay out of sync. So just figure out where exactly is the line to follow that is in the best area of lift and avoids the areas of sync. And the second is, when you're thermaling, you can only pick the best climbs and you have to get the highest climb rate. And if you do those 2 things, you're going to win the contest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Right?
Consistency in those 2 things, I would say that's going to win the contest. I mean, there's other things. Don't detour and do tactical things right. But at the end of the day, it's those 2 things: fly and lift and get the best climbs.
Overall, Clemens, did the week there live up to your expectations in terms of how the event was organized and how it was run?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean the main organizer, as you know, in Nephi is one of your guests, Bruno Wassel,
Right,
the famous YouTuber.
Yeah.
And I mean, Bruno has a lot of experience for events like this, but he also has a tremendous passion for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, the venue that really, he has also been instrumental in putting the venue together. That venue is outstanding for holding events like this. So you have this great hangar for the pilots meeting. You've got water faucets for every single tie down area. So everybody has a water faucet to put, a lot of water into their gliders. And that's a lot of water, right? If everybody's using 180 liters of water every single day,
Oh yeah.
to put into their gliders. That's a lot of water that is being used.
Yeah.
And then you have the city of Nephi, super supportive. The mayor came out. I think he shows up at pretty much all of those Nephi events,
Nice.
and expresses the support of the city. And it's
That's
a
great.
really remarkable place. I mean, and if there's anything that could have been better, I think it would be having more tow planes. Sometimes we just had. Sometimes it just took a little long to get the whole fleet up and going, and we
Yeah.
could have made even better use of the soaring days if we had
Right.
launched the fleet faster. But I'd say that's a minor thing. The venue is great, the organization was great. It was very nice.
So with that question, I guess I want to ask you, what were your best and worst memories or moments from Nephi this year?
It's hard to say. I would say the best moments maybe are, when it comes to the flying, when you're making a different decision from everybody else, and it turns out to be the right decision. I mean, that's enormously satisfying, especially for someone like me who doesn't have the experience, right? So, I mean, relatively limited experience still in terms of these high-level contests. So, for example, there was one day on our first leg, and I was along a cloud street, and I noticed immediately that cloud street was due to convergence, and that the best lift would be upwind of the clouds and not under the dark stuff that people usually follow. And so I saw, the whole bunch of gliders ahead of me. They were heading
Right.
into the dark, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm staying on the upwind side of the cloud. And then, 10 minutes later, along that street south, not only was I ahead of everybody, I was also a few thousand feet higher than everybody.
Nice. Awesome.
So that really feels good. Of course, I
Right.
squandered all that advantage shortly after, but in the moment, that really felt good. So
That felt pretty
and
good,
it's those kind of moments where you're doing something, you're doing it on your own. It's not like you're following somebody blindly, which I don't
Yeah,
like to
exactly.
do. I don't like to do anyway. But I rather make my own decisions and end up last, but I learn something from it than to follow someone down a track and not really knowing why I'm
Yeah.
doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's gratifying if you make your decisions and they turn out to be right.
That's awesome. Now, this has nothing to do with Nephi, but this is kind of exciting stuff. Did you see or hear about the upcoming FAI sanctional the International Grand Prix race that will be run on Condor's platform?
Yeah, I have seen that, and I think it's great that the FAI is sanctioning a Condor race. So I think that's really cool. Really cool, yeah.
I think there's like one pilot from each of 20 countries going head to head. It's going to be pretty awesome. I guess it's in September.
Yeah, yep.
Apart from roll racing in your glider, is something like this potentially of interest to you?
I mean, I didn't sign up for one of those to be one of those 20 pilots that were selected. But I probably wouldn't. I have a few hundred hours in Condor, but I think the people who will win that are the people who've got many thousands of hours of Condor. And Condor is a great tool, and it has a lot of similarities with the real life. But to be an outstanding Condor pilot, I think you have to be an outstanding Condor pilot, not just an outstanding racing pilot. I think if you give Sebastian Cava on Condor, I don't think he will win against the top Condor pilots. So I think there's a different sort of fine-tuned skill set that's required. But I'd also say there is to this race. I mean, there's an open event. I don't know if you saw that too. So there's an open event. Anyone can sign up for that event. Yeah. I think last time I checked, there was about 200 people that were signed up to fly the same race tasks. And I think this is held simultaneously with the world with the Grand Prix World Cup final in France.
Yep.
Beginning of September, yeah, as you said.
Yeah.
And so I think anyone can sign up. So there's lots of time slots available. So so that you can pick a time zone that works for you. And so I would say anyone who's a Condor pilot and proficient in flying Condor should just sign up and do it for fun. I mean, I've signed up for it. I don't think I'm gonna fly all the races because I don't have time for all those races. But I'm gonna fly some of those races and just for fun.
Yeah, good stuff.
It's definitely fun.
Clemens, thank you so much for joining me again. It's been really fun catching up with you and hearing about Nephi. Such a beautiful place to fly, and wow, what a great experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and likewise. I mean, I thank you for inviting me again. And this was one of the more memorable experiences. So flying these national contests, I think it's pretty awesome. It's a great experience. I would really encourage anyone who's got cross country experience to try a regional contest and see if it's for you. And if you don't have the cross-country experience to fly a contest, then first get the cross-country experience, because it's a lot more fun to fly cross-country than just fly around the airport. But it's a great fun to fly these contests, and you learn a lot. So I just thank you, Jack, for the podcast and for spreading the word about all this stuff. So I think, yeah.
Absolutely. I have a great team behind me. They're doing a great job, and yeah, we're just going to push forward and keep getting some great soaring content out there.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I think your quality keeps improving, and your audience keeps improving and gets growing, and you're doing a great service to the community. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Clemens. I will probably bug you again because I love chatting with you. I love hearing what you're doing. I will ask you to throw that plug in there for your blog you do, because I enjoy that. But tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, anyone interested in this type of content, right? So there's a lot more of this content on there's a blog. It's called jessintheair.com that you can follow. And I also have a YouTube channel that is very different from the other soaring YouTube channels. I put a lot of energy into analyzing my own flights and understanding what it is that I did wrong and what it is that I did right. And hopefully, I mean, basically the feedback I'm getting is that there's a lot of other people who find it useful. I'm not, telling anyone that I'm the most experienced and the most proficient contest soaring pilot or record soaring pilot, but I've learned a great deal over the last few years, and you can see if you want to learn it yourself, I think this is maybe a tool that you might find useful. So you can look it up, Chase in the Air, either on YouTube or on jessintheair.com or on my Facebook page.
Absolutely. Thank you, Clemens. I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for having me.
All right, take care. Fly safe.
Yep, you too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Our sponsors mean a lot to us, and one of those important sponsors is Aerox Aviation Oxygen Systems. They are number one in portable and engineered oxygen systems and your source for FAA-approved oxygen mask and portable systems. Aerox recently introduced the Aerox Pro 2 Plus Flight Bag portable oxygen system. This thing is small, lightweight, and it is super simple to use. The Pro 2 Plus is perfect for that occasional user who wants the flexibility to access those higher altitudes without having to worry about flying impaired. It's now available at Aerox distributors and, of course, at aerox.com. So remember our friends at Aerox, engineered for aviators.
Hi everyone, Sergio from Soaring Master here. Today we're going to talk about one of the hardest battles cross-country pilots have to fight up in the air, the mental battle before landing out. Landing out is a characteristic of our aerial sport, but even with all the trainings available nowadays, we still see gliders getting damaged up on out landings due to pilots' late decision taking, regardless of their experience. Most of these situations could have been avoided if the pilot had committed to land 50 meters or 150 feet higher than he did. This delay is often spent trying to avoid the inevitable outlanding, With the pilot immersed in a rush of conflicting thoughts, the pilot is conscious that the situation is becoming marginal, but the wager softens the seriousness of the situation that only gets worse with each second that goes by. In order to avoid this, we need to understand what goes on in our minds in these moments. There are three main lines of thought that negatively influence the decision to commit to land out. The first is fear of the outcome or uncertainty with one's ability to perform an out landing. This is more common with new cross-country pilots, and usually this fear vanishes after proper training. The second line is related to our ego, making the will to achieve the original flight goal such a huge factor that it blinds the pilot from a rational analysis of the situation. With thoughts like, I will succeed, I know that I can find a turbo, let me turn just one more time. The third line of thought is related to the way we want others to perceive us. Common lines are, what are others going to think about me? What is my club going to think about me? I cannot allow this to happen again. What is my family going to think about this? The more experienced we are, the less vulnerable to these thoughts we get. Not because the mind stops generating them, but because our awareness makes us quickly identify when this mechanism has started to run in our minds. And thus it allows us to rapidly focus again on the present situation, and in this way not letting our emotions affect our decisions. So awareness is the main weapon we have against these thoughts. Another good tip is to always ask yourself a magic question. Before taking any decision, ask yourself, am I taking a safety risk with this decision or not? When we fly, we only compete with our own limitations, and winning the mental battle, particularly before an out landing, is one of the most important victories out there. See you next episode, guys.
Thank you for hanging out with us for episode 99, and that means in a couple weeks we bring you episode 100. We already have a very special guest lined up and some other fun stuff we have planned. So I hope you plan to join us, but until then, stay healthy, stay safe, and happy soaring.
If you would like to say hi and let us know where you are enjoying the podcast, we would love to hear from you. If you are a glider pilot and want to share your aviation journey, contact us at chuck@soaringthesky.com or send us a message on our website at soaringthesky.com and Chuck will get in touch with you. We hope you join us next time for another soaring adventure here on Soaring the Sky, a Glider Pilots podcast. Soaring the Sky is written and produced by Chuck Fulton, co-producer Mitch Thompson. Original music for the podcast was written and produced by Kim Spangler. Graphic design for the podcast was created by Zachary Fulton. Voiceover work was done by Michelle Perez.